Hello, today we are going to discuss creating and running a constraint plan. So what are the objectives of this lesson? After completing this lesson, you should be able to set up plan options and run a constraint plan. The first section we are going over is the setup plan options. Well, what are the benefits of constraint-based planning? First, constraint supply plan increases supply chain efficiency by using all possible alternate sources of supply to meet demand on time. And planner productivity is improved by automating decision making. For example, a manufacturer of spectrometers cannot satisfy customer demands due to the overloaded labor resource in its glass shop. To resolve this issue, they add another labor resource as an alternate resource in the glass shop. As a result, the planning system uses the alternate resource when the primary resource is overloaded, and by doing this, it resolves the overloaded issue. To use constraint-based planning feature, you need to opt in this feature. And as shown here, you can do this in the setup and maintenance module. Next is to create a plan. And to create a plan, the first thing is to define the plan options. For a constraint supply plan, you need to set the supply planning mode to constraint. Here, we are showing plan options for specifying planning time buckets. You can make these types of selections: days, weeks, periods, months, days, weeks, days, periods, and days, month. The user will also specify the number of buckets for each bucket type selected. The number of buckets field will only be enabled if a bucket type has been selected first. By default, the plan buckets will show day in the first box and a null value in the second box. In regards to the partial buckets, the do not create partial buckets checkbox is used to determine if a partial week or period needs to be created during the process of establishing plan buckets. Consider this example. Let's say we have selected 30 days, 11 months, and the plan start date is March 15. And the do not create partial buckets checkbox is checked. The bucketing behavior is like this. 30 days from March 15 will be April 14. April 14 falls in the middle of April. Since the checkbox is checked, the bucketing logic will add daily buckets until the end of April. Then we are going to have daily buckets from March 15 till April 30th, and 11 monthly bucket starting May 1st. Let's talk about planning safety stock. Safety stock planning method has these options. Do not plan safety stock. When you select this option, there will be no safety stock calculated or planned for any item in the plan. Next one is user specified values for all items. In this case, safety stock is planned for all items based on each item's safety stock method. The next one is a statistical safety stock for end items, none for all others. In this case, safety stock is planned only for those end items that have a statistical safety parameters defined for them. And the last one is this: a statistical for end items, user specified for all others. For this option, safety stock is planned only for those end items that have a statistical safety stock parameters defined for them. And in addition to that, safety stock is planned for other items based on their safety stock method. I'd like to also mention that you can specify additional plan options for safety stock like service level percentage, forecast error type for items with a statistical safety stock. You can also specify safety stock smoothing details as needed by business. Now, let's go to plan options in the supply tab. First one is plan start and end date, which is read-only. These are supply plan date fields where end date is equal to plan start date plus plan horizon days set in a scope tab. The other ones are demand time fence and planning time fence. Planners can enable or disable these options. When you enable demand time fence, planning calculations ignore forecast demands before the demand time fence date and consider only sales order demand when calculating gross requirements. Planning time fence is the time duration within which the planning process does not alter the plan. For planned items within the planning time fence, the planning process does not reschedule in order due dates or create plan orders. Finally, you should specify an assignment set to assign sourcing rules and bills of distribution to organizations and items for material flow within the supply plan. In the forecast allocation and consumption subtab, you can specify forecast spreading option and forecast spreading calendar. Forecast spreading determines how weekly or period forecast can be spread, and the options are spread forecast evenly or do not spread forecast. For the spread forecast calendar, you have the options to select manufacturing or shipping calendar, which is in this case, the selected calendar type is used for all organizations in the plan. Or you can select user-defined calendar for each planned organization. In this case, you can select a calendar on the Organization tab. As a planner, you can also specify how sales orders consume forecast, either within a forecast bucket or consider other buckets using backward and forward days. If consumption is by backward and forward days, then you can specify these day ranges here. Now let's go to the Organization and Schedules tab. Use this tab to configure sub-inventory netting and forecast spreading calendars by organization. The organization listed here are populated based upon the organization level members specified in the Scope tab. You can specify the sub-inventories that are enabled for netting for each organization. Only the on-hand quantities in the sub-inventory selected for netting will be considered in the plan. Here also you can select demand schedules used as demands by the supply planning engine. Let's talk about the measures levels. These are dimension levels at which to load the forecast measure. Item and organization are fixed levels, but levels can be changed for other dimensions such as time if demand is planned at higher time levels. If the demand schedule type is external or production, the measure level field is disabled. For example, external forecast is planned at the same level as it is loaded. The other important field here is ship to consumption level, which identifies the forecast consumption level for the demand schedule. These levels vary depending on the output level of the demand forecast. For example, if demand class and or customer dimension levels are excluded in measure levels, then the list of levels is filtered to item only. If the demand schedule type is external or production, the consumption level is item. Now let's go to the constraint and decision rule subtab. To specify constraint and decision rules. Here you specify capacity constraint resources as either all resources or bottleneck resources only to indicate how the plan will apply capacity constraints to resources. You can also select whether to apply supplier capacity constraints, as well as you can specify the alternate sources of supply. Please note that the resource attribute bottleneck is not a source attribute. It can be specified in the supply chain planning resources page. The default value for the bottleneck attribute is set to no. Finally, here we are showing the advanced optimization parameters in the new tab in Advanced Optimization tab. One very important note is this. Please do not change these default values unless advised to do so by your Oracle support engineer. This section discusses how to run a constraint plan. Here we have the Run Plan screen. Unlike on constraint plans that can be run in interactive mode or in batch mode, constraint plans can only be run in batch mode. In the details section here, we have the following data refresh options. Do not refresh with current data. If you select this option to run the plan in simulation mode after making changes in the plan data. Refresh with selected current data. Select this option to partially refresh your data. The options available are forecast, sales order, and supplies. And finally is the refresh with current data. Select this option to refresh the complete plan with the latest collected data. Now, let's look at the demo for setting plan options and running a constraint plan. First, we go to Setup and Maintenance module and enable constraint-based planning opt-in feature. Okay, for that, change feature opt-in, click on this. And then for the supply chain planning, we want to see the features in the supply chain planning. And one of them is constraint-based planning. And here in this column, enable column, you need to check this checkbox to enable the constraint-based planning feature. Next, we're going to supply chain planning module. And in the plan options, set the supply planning mode to constraint plan. Here it is, supply planning mode to constraint. Then we go to the scope tab, which is already, we are coming into that as a default. And in this plan parameters section, we can specify the planning time buckets that we just talked about it, as well as the checkbox do not create partial buckets is here. Next, let's go to the safety stock tab. And as we said, there are safety stock planning method options that you can choose. And there are 4 of them. Do not plan safety stock, user specified values for all items, a statistical safety stock for end items, none for all others, a statistical for end items, user specified for all others. Then in the supply tab, we are going to start with the general tab under the supply tab. And these are the checkboxes for demand time fence control and planning time fence control. You can check it here to control the plan by the demand time fence and also by the planning time fence. And then you have forecast allocation consumption sub-tab under the supply tab. And all the forecast related attributes parameters are set here. The ones we talked about, is forecast spreading. You have 2 options to spread forecast evenly, or you do not spread forecast. And also the calendar that you want to choose is their manufacturing calendar or shipping calendar or a user-defined calendar for each organization separately. And then you have forecast consumption parameters and attributes that you define here. Next, we go to the decision rule tab. Here in the decision rule tab, we have the capacity constraint resources. You can select them as all resources or bottleneck resources. Also, we have a checkbox here, apply supplier capacity constraints, so you can include supplier capacity as a constraint in the plan, or you can clear it out. The decision rules are specified in this section. So, if you check one of these checkboxes, you include the use alternates or substitutes, for example, in your plan. And then also the organization and the schedules, basically tab we have here. As we mentioned, you have the plan, the organization here, and for each planned organization, you can configure sub-inventory netting, as well as if you selected a forecast spreading calendar user-defined, then you can specify for that each organization here a forecast spreading calendar. And finally, we want to go ahead and run the plan and close the plan options here. And then from the actions menu, we bring up the run plan screen. And as we mentioned before, I'm going to repeat this, that only you can run in batch mode. Constraint plans only run in batch mode. And refresh options are also listed here that you can select one of them. Do not refresh with current data, refresh with the selected current data, refresh with current data. So what you should have learned in this lesson are these. You should be able to set up plan options and run a constraint plan.